in about June, I think it was, and it was from IBM, one of their webinars, where they described how in 2 weeks they established a blockchain solution for providing of personal protective equipment to the New York hospitals. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was a great difficulty with obtaining this personal protective equipment because it is a highly regulated industry, and the hospitals just didn't know who can supply, who has the stock to supply them, and whether these people are legitimate. And so this blockchain solution was devised and implemented within 2 weeks. It took the suppliers from inside the US only 1 day to get registered on the blockchain. So they were verified. They had somebody to come and check out whether they are, a proper supplier. And after that, they could put their stock on the blockchain to make hospitals aware of what they have. And this way it contributed hugely towards the solving of this PPE issue. So that was my bit contribution, and I hope Gustavo will join us now to ask the next question, and I think Annika will be answering it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, that's good.
So turn me off.
Actually, I want to know from Annika, what should be done first of all in order to help the miners to benefit from blockchain?
You need to make her a presenter.
Yeah. Okay, she should be
Tony,
coming out.
You need to turn me off.
Yes, she is now a presenter. She can answer our question now.
Okay. Annika, you'll need to turn on your camera. Okay, it's working, it's happening.
We cannot hear you, Annika.
Yeah, the mic is off.
Here we go. There we go. Thanks for the question. So what needs to be done first? I mean, I think it ties into some of the concepts I was touching on in my presentation, right? And actually, you see this really nicely with lots of the people that have presented today, which is we need to make it usable. We can't go in explaining blockchain to people. It's not a concept that matters. It enables you to solve problems in ways that previously weren't either possible to solve or couldn't be solved in the most optimal, cheapest, best, most optimal, fastest, what have you way, right? So I think it's about explaining the business value or the solution to a need that the miner may have, and speaking about the business value that you're able to provide, and figuring out how to integrate that into their existing processes and the technology that they use. But I don't think you should almost even mention the word blockchain necessarily. You should talk about the value that it brings. And then, of course, later on, as they start to understand, they see value, they want to learn about it. And so being able to provide them the resources to learn more, to understand what problems it fits with best, so that they can then come back to you and say, actually, maybe these are the areas that it works. And then you'll really start to understand the value that it can provide in the industry once the industry itself starts to innovate rather than people externally coming in.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
The next question actually goes to Tony. And is a bit related to also what Hugh was talking before in terms of on implementation of the technology right before when we have this new wave of SAP coming, and making sure that we didn't have any duplicates of files. So for Tony, what are the biggest challenges for the implementation of this technology nowadays, based on your experience?
So, I mean, and by the way, I'm not a blockchain expert, but if you think about, the whole gamut of new digital technologies, including analytics and digital twins and drones and whatever it is, what we generally see is it's absolutely not about the technology. It's about the organizational alignment that you need to have in place for people to use the technologies in their day-to-day operations. So it's about people, process, and organizational change. And we've learned that the very, very hard way over the last 15 years in oil and gas. And the depressing thing, I would say, is where we thought when we first put our first visions for this together in oil and gas in 2003 and 4, where we thought we would be in 2010, we're still not there more than 10 years later, I would say. So that you just cannot overestimate the organizational resistance to this. So that's absolutely key. I do agree that, you know, all these technologies have got to be about problem solving. They've got to be, what is the real operational need in the field, and how is it going to change? And I think when we do this and we try and convince people in the operations to use new technologies, we generally think about three things. One is the quantifiable business case. So how much money am I going to spend on doing this, and what am I going to save? And usually that saving is in more productions or less cost, right? Mm-hmm. At those two levers, occasionally more recovery, depending on your situation. But there are two other ways that two other things I think you need to address if you want to convince people to do this. One is what we call the qualitative business case. So that's explaining to a mining geologist or an engineer or a technician or a team leader in the field how this is going to improve his daily work life, right? It's the explanation of the what's in it for me. And then the third thing is what we call the enabling business case. And what we mean by that is what is it that you have to do tomorrow that you can't do today and you've got no choice, right? Because more often than not, if this is just an incremental improvement, if there's not a burning bridge, it's very hard to get these things installed. There's no doubt, and we've got case after case after case of this, of, you know, tens of millions of dollars, euros being spent on IT integration systems that have been junked after 2 or 3 years in oil and gas. There's no doubt about it. And I think there are some interesting lessons learned. You know, one of the things BHP did in their IROC in Perth very early on is when all they really did was co-locate all the people in that center. They didn't bring in any fancy IT or informational data systems at all. What they actually did was co-locate them and get them to work out what was the barriers to the processes which were stopping them working together. And they would literally map it out on whiteboards with bits of paper and colored pens. And it was only after they nailed that process down, which took them, you know, nearly 2 years, that they then implemented an integrated data and information platform. So I think, you know, don't oversell this stuff is the other thing. You know, you know, because as operations guys will have half a dozen different initiatives coming at them, all claiming to do the same sort of thing. You know?
Yeah. Thank you for your answer. And our next question actually is related to what Anika was saying before, and it goes to who? Yeah, what kind of companies should implement blockchain and are not doing it yet?
Okay, so I'll answer that a little bit with an answer from the previous question as well, because I agree with everything you said, Tony, but it's also much worse than that when you're implementing. It depends what you're implementing, whether it's for one company or a group. But where we're working with MineHub, we're implementing this for the industry. So you've got, you know, what are you going to do and why? What's the value? What's the business case? But then you've got the internal politics. Okay, who's your sponsor? Who's going to sign off on it? Where's the budget coming from? Well, that's all very well for one company, but actually it's which company is going to get the value, who is the sponsor in each company, is the value unequal, who has to do what. For some people, it might actually be a negative, for others a positive. So how do you get that alignment across all the different parties? So for a lot of the work that I've done, the governance is very much the most important thing. And if you look at some of the big blockchain projects where they've There's some that have worked really well at the start, and publicly they're a great success, but then they've not, I wouldn't say imploded, but they've slowed down significantly over what they should have been, because you've got politics from the market coming into the boardroom and all sorts of things like that, or you've got unequal benefits across different companies. So you need to get that alignment across the different users correct. And it's the same as what you said around, make sure the users are going to like it, it's going to change their lives, but then again, whose lives in which companies. For me, for the second question, Gustavo, there, if in terms of what kind of companies should be implementing blockchain, and which aren't at the moment, I think there's some things you can do internally, which are there's different cases there. I'm generally, personally, I haven't really looked at those as much, at least not for a long time. Where it's a group activity or a group benefit, anywhere where you have a market which is not high frequency, as much as the technology can do some of that, it's more of a push. It's harder on the technology side. But where there are a large number of parties that are ever changing, coordinating around something, so that could be in a pharmaceutical supply chain, or actually any world supply chain, tends to have those things. If you look at interbank settlement, it's slightly different. You tend to have a lot of bilateral between two parties, or a third party as well. So although you can solve a lot of the issues there, the problem becomes exponentially harder to deal with when you can't just do direct integrations. So yeah, anyone in an industry with that kind of supply chain, or with even in telecoms where you've got lots of parties trading for overseas data and things like that, there's a lot of people, a lot of departments, a lot of companies involved in the settlement and processing after the fact, after the trade has been agreed or signed, or whatever it is. Those kind of companies should be looking at it. In terms of which are not and should be now, if you're in one of those industries and you're not right now, chances are super high that several of your competition have already. So I suppose don't get left behind on that. But it's the advantages need to be well defined, and for who's going to get which advantages before you can really deploy a project like that.
Right.
I mean, just to come back to you on that, I mean, it's exactly what we see in oil and gas. I mean, in oil and gas, the problem isn't that we don't have data standards, it's that we have too many data standards and nobody will agree on the one that is going to become the universal data standard. And if you just take drilling as an example, I mean, that data standard took 10 to 12 years to evolve to become an industry standard. Now we've got an industry standard for drilling data, but we don't have it for production data or subsurface data yet. And in fact, there were a number of the service companies who were trying to have a slightly different version of the standard so that they could lock you in or lock you out, if you see what I mean. So there was a huge amount of politics being played, and it was extremely difficult to get it aligned. And I would say, even 15, 20 years on, we're really not there, even with the easy one in our domain, which is drilling.
And that's why the governance is so important. If you have a central party, like we are signing up with our clients to certain rules in terms of how we operate, where basically they've got a loaded gun over us saying, well, if you break these rules, we can, and I don't know legally yet exactly how it's being set up, but effectively we can rip out the management team and fix it. Now that's not something that most companies traditionally do, but it means that we can effectively prove that if we ever acted in a way where we're trying to create a standard that's going to lock everyone in rather than making it all open, if we're trying to exclude certain parties or triple the fees or whatever it is on the core platform, that gives them control over that situation. So we can never do that, and that kind of issue has come up time and time again, where you've got a central, stock exchange or settlement platform, whatever it is, that's been formed, and then the moment it's all signed and going, they triple the fees. and they renegotiate everything. They are a monopoly. So yeah, it becomes very difficult if you don't set that up right at the start.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, we have run out of time, and I want to be on time because people are very patiently still online, but I want to make sure that I don't miss on the important part, which is saying thank you. So first of all, thank you to all our speakers who supported me and in this initiative. It was the very first one, and it worked out, I think, pretty well, especially great interest that we've received and fantastic quality of presentations. I'm sure they will be viewed on YouTube many times. Then, of course, thank you to Gustavo for joining me on this journey. I would not have felt so confident. So thank you for your support. And I hope we will continue to work and offer our services to the blockchain and mining community. I also want to thank Minex Conference, Arthur Polikov, who invited me several times to his conferences to promote my blockchain mining idea. I'm very grateful for that. And it was actually from this conference that the idea of that conference was born, from my presentation at the Minex conference in July. I want to thank Dr. Jane Thomason of FinTech, who supported me in my, ambition to run this conference. It was quite scary. And same Helen Disney from Women in Blockchain Group. She is running her own company called Unblock. Support from my female colleagues is very much appreciated. It's scary stuff, starting something like that. And finally, I want to thank my family and specifically my children who actually helped me sort out the software. My son wrote the music that you've heard in the beginning of the conference and also did a lot of the design. So very, very grateful for all those people. And we'll be looking forward to seeing many of you again end of October. And have a great day.